This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. Tribes across the country took the pandemic seriously from the beginning. Tribes closed casinos before those in Las Vegas and implemented public health precautions like road checkpoints and wearing masks long before many states. Several communities and pueblos completely shut down access to people from outside communities. So how is the Indian health system doing on vaccine distribution?
We're doing this better than the rest of the United States. Yeah, we're really fortunate. We have a system in place. And as public health communities, I keep telling all of my friends in the state and federal levels, like, you should have asked an Indian on how to do this a long time ago.
A recent report by NBC News found distribution problems in all 50 states. The report said what makes the U.S. especially troubled is that the healthcare system is not centralized. And the administration of President Donald Trump failed to build a proper national vaccine rollout plan to fill the void. But the Indian health system, a combination of federal clinics and hospitals, plus those run by tribes and nonprofits, is a system serving a distinct population. And so a distribution plan could be properly executed. Abigail Echohawk says the Seattle Indian Health Board has vaccinated more people than other places because they already vaccinated the majority of the high-risk Native people in King County. The health center has now expanded to lower age groups, and Echohawk is seeing this trend nationwide for tribes and in urban Native communities. The rest of the country is still in the early stages of giving vaccines to the elderly. As of January 29th, IHS has distributed a total of 424,200 vaccine doses to the 12 Indian health areas. If all those vaccinations were administered, Indian Health Service has already reached 21% of its approximately 2 million individuals. That compares to about 10% of the U.S. population that has received at least one dose of the vaccine, and about 3% that has received both doses, according to the Associated Press. Jasmine Blackwater Nygren is taking a vacated seat in the Arizona legislature. The 25-year-old Dene woman will fill the shoes of former state representative Orlando Teller, who resigned to accept a position in the Biden administration. Nygren received her law degree from Arizona State University and passed the Arizona bar exam last year. Her selection was made at a special meeting of the Apache County Board of Supervisors. She was up against two other candidates. Arizona's 7th district spans a large portion of the state and includes the Navajo Nation, Hopi, and the White Mountain Apache tribes. Blackwater Nygren will be sworn in at a later date by the Arizona Secretary of State, and she will serve in the position until 2022. Renowned writer Louise Bernice Huff, also known by her Cree name Sky Dancer, is Canada's new Parliamentary Poet Laureate. The appointment makes her the 9th poet to serve in the position and the first from an Indigenous community. Huff was raised on the Saddle Lake Reserve and attended Blue Quills Residential School in central Alberta. The poet says her work is about recording the history of her personal experiences and those of her family and community. The Saskatoon wordsmith has won accolades for weaving Cree language and teachings into her works. Looking ahead to her mandate over the next 2 years, Huff says her focus is on crossing barriers and fostering dialogue. After a successful pilot showing, FX is handing a series order for the Native American comedy Reservation Dogs. Filmmaker Sterling Harjo, who is Muskogee Creek Nation, says much of the series is based on his and his co-producer Taika Waititi's childhood. And he says the title, Reservation Dogs, is more of a joke. Saying since the court ruling of the McGirt case, the 4 kids in the series now live on a reservation. Harjo talked to us about how his production embraces the collaborative nature of filmmaking.
If you don't embrace that, then it's going to be very hard for you. You have to embrace that and enjoy collaboration, and it only makes it better.
Harjo plans to begin filming the rest of the show around March or April, depending on COVID regulations. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Mark Trahant. When we come back, some advice from Chef Sherman on how to decolonize your Valentine's Day dinner with indigenous foods. Many couples will be making a special Valentine's Day dinner this weekend. What will you cook up that's nutritious and delicious? For advice, we turn to Sherman, member of the Oglala Lakota Nation. He's the Sioux Chef based in Minneapolis. Sean teaches skills such as plant identification, gathering, cultivation, and preparation of indigenous ingredients. He believes that food is at the heart of cultural reclamation. His awards include fellowships from First Peoples Fund and the Bush Foundation, and the James Beard Award for Best American Cookbook. With his partner, Dana Thompson, they're opening an Indigenous food lab. And this spring, they will open a restaurant in the Mississippi Riverfront Park. Welcome, Sean.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sean, let's start with kind of an update on your work. You're doing so many things. We'd love to hear what you're doing.
Sure. Well, first off, we launched our nonprofit kitchen called Indigenous Food Lab under our nonprofit called NATIVS, which is an acronym for North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems. We've been doing a lot of food relief and getting healthy Indigenous foods out to our communities around Minneapolis. So we've been serving 9 out of 11 tribal communities. We've been pushing out 10,000 Indigenous meals every week with our small team right now, and that's been really exciting. And we're really excited to open up our first restaurant in downtown Minneapolis, right on the riverfront, called Owamni, which is named after the Dakota name for the waterfalls that used to be downtown, which was Owamni Amni. And it's going to be a really beautiful location for people to come and visit and try some Indigenous foods.
Excellent. What was your inspiration for starting this work?
A lot of this work was just because I grew up in restaurants. I started working in restaurants in the Black Hills when I was a teenager and worked all through high school and college. And after I became a chef in Minneapolis at a pretty young age, a few years into that, I realized the complete absence of Indigenous perspective in our culinary anywhere. And it's just like, where are all the Native restaurants? You know, we have all this beautiful Native culture everywhere. So we should be having restaurants that feature all of our diversity. And it really shot me on a path to try and understand, you know, what are Indigenous foods and what are Indigenous food systems and how can we apply that today?
Well, and so much of your work is not just educating the general public, but really educating Indigenous community about what Indigenous food is and how to get excited by it.
Yeah, our key goal with the nonprofit is just creating access to Indigenous education, which was just the knowledge our ancestors wanted us to have of how to harvest plants and grow plants and hunt and fish and cook and preserve, and just all the stories and traditions that go along with that. So we truly believe in creating access to Indigenous education and along the way, just creating access to Indigenous foods.
I know the pandemic has changed so much of things for everybody. But one of the ways it's changed is probably the food industry more than anything else. How has it impacted both your plans and your day-to-day thoughts?
You know, the pandemic's been a really rough one, and plus we're here in Minneapolis where the George Floyd murder happened just a few blocks from us, and a lot of social uprising and destruction happened around us, and it just motivated our team to get out there and do what we can to help, and also to help protect a lot of our Indigenous food growers and local food growers around us. So we've been able to supply or spend tens of thousands of dollars on Indigenous food product, and using our team to process that into healthy Indigenous foods and get it directly into tribal communities.
What's it like launching a new venture in this time?
It's a little scary, but we have this beautiful outdoor place, and it's really going to be, you know, perfect for kind of moving into hopefully a post-COVID world. But there's just going to be a lot of outdoor space for people to sit and spread out, and we're just it's got beautiful views of the downtown Mississippi River, and just on a really sacred place for Dakota and Anishinaabe people in this region.
It's funny when you think about it, and there are all kinds of downsides to COVID, but some of the plus side is rethinking life. And you think about restaurants where they're spacing people apart. And I know I've been in so many really wonderful restaurants that are so noisy, and the experience is not all that it could be. And this kind of changes the equation with that, where you can actually enjoy the food and kind of the surroundings in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be a wonderful summer, and we're looking forward to just getting people to come and visit, and hopefully inspiring more people to want to open up more Native restaurants, because we should have them in every city.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Valentine's Day. What ideas can you share with us for making that perfect dinner?
We always ask people to just really think about the land that they're on and the history, and see if they can purchase any indigenous products to support indigenous growers, and just make something that feels special and feels right at the moment. And we love cooking seasonal, and it's hard to do here in Minnesota in the middle of winter, where if you like snow cones, then we've got plenty of that. But we just really inspire people to just think about the plants and the animals around them, and how our indigenous ancestors utilize some of our wonderful foods and create some new recipes out of those.
It's fun. Over the past few years, it's become really common to have land acknowledgement in all kinds of settings. It'd almost be the same way with food, where when you go to a place, have that same sense of identity about the land and where you're coming from, and to know what foods are from there.
Absolutely. We have so much wonderful cultural and culinary diversity across this whole nation, and we just want people to really see that. And our focus is North America, so we look at Mexico all the way through Alaska and all the amazing indigenous diversity that lies out there. And if we had indigenous restaurants featuring all of these wonderful flavors and traditions and cultures, it would just be so easy to see all of this amazing diversity. So we should be celebrating that diversity instead of trying to homogenize it all the time. So we just see a better future that way.
How do you get people to break from what they consider traditions, even though they're new, with foods that are not the most healthy, but yet seen as the ones you share?
I think that, one of the best parts about the indigenous diet is the health base of it, and we removed colonial ingredients. So we stopped using dairy and wheat flour and cane sugar, even beef, pork, and chicken, just to showcase other proteins that have been around us a lot longer. And I think people are really curious about that, because food is cultural identity, and food is a great way to learn other people's cultures at the same time. So we just really, push for people to try and explore the food and the land and the history of where they might be right at the moment.
Let me ask you about young people. If someone's interested in food, what kind of things do they need to be thinking about, either as a career as a chef or even a critic, or any of the other jobs associated with that?
There is so much room for more indigenous peoples in the food business, food industry, because we need growers, we need harvesters and foragers, we need chefs and caterers and food truck operators, and we just need a lot of people to help write and educate, and there's just so much out there. So hopefully we can inspire people to find some of their passion, whether it's raising animals or going out there in the wild and finding plants, or creating permacultural designs and putting food all around us so it's right there for us. There's just so much, and we're helping to create an immense demand, because we prioritize purchasing from indigenous vendors first, and we want to do everything we can to help support that.
Well, and it's fun. It's amazing how some of the, particularly the agriculture products, are so beautiful when you think about it. I think about the density of blue corn or red corn, and how different that is from what most people think of as even corn.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to think about this amazing history of indigenous agriculture that spans from Mexico all the way up into my regions in Minnesota, and how much amazing product is still out there. And just, we have to really be stewards of these amazing seeds and these amazing heritage pieces that are a part of our cultures and a part of our family.
Even before the first wave of settlers, there was trade routes that were really extensive, and food was a big part of that.
Absolutely. I mean, food is the center of so much, and we need to protect that. And if we can get a control of where our food comes from, especially as tribal communities, if we can start creating food for ourselves, then we can truly, have so much power to control our own destinies, because food carries that power, and food carries these wonderful stories that our ancestors have passed down, and we need to preserve those.
Yeah, I want to go back to the question about young people and skills. What are steps somebody can take to become a chef?
Well, there's a lot of resources out there, obviously, and there's a lot of culinary programs, and we're hoping that as COVID kind of lifts up a little bit, people can come and work with us at the Indigenous Food Lab to get to more focused Indigenous education around culinary, and we just see a brighter future with that being available.
Great. One last question, and that, what are you cooking this weekend?
I have a bunch of smoked pheasant, so I'm trying to figure out what to do with that, but looking forward to it, whatever comes out of that.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean Sherman, the Sioux Chef from Minneapolis, for joining us.
All right, Pilame.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the Biden administration and the whole idea of consultation. Indian country is eagerly looking forward to what a Joe Biden administration means to tribes, especially when it comes to sovereignty and action on key issues such as climate change. Already, the new president has promised to reinstate the meeting between cabinet secretaries and tribal leaders, something that was started under former President Barack Obama. To get a more clear picture of what this could mean to tribal people, Holly Cook Macarro joins us today. She's a partner with Spirit Rock Consulting, and since 2001, she's been a lobbyist for tribes, and she also served in the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. Welcome back, Holly.
Thank you. Good morning. It's good to see you again, or good afternoon.
We had to rush out last time, but we just started talking about consultation, and that's a whole different world now in the Biden administration.
Yes, we're hopeful. We're obviously in the early days of the administration, but we have high hopes. And right out of the gate, I believe, was it on the 26th that they issued the executive memorandum. It's been mistakenly referred to, I've seen in a few places, as an executive order, but it's basically hearkening back to the Clinton executive order from the late 90s that was put forth to require consultation with tribal governments. And as you know, subsequent presidents can either ignore or reinforce executive orders of previous presidents. So even though there's been a little bit of grumbling that this is just a replay from previous action and expecting something a little more shock and awe right out of the gate, this is important because it lays the foundation both for new political appointees, staff, and others at the departments that they take a look at their consultation policy. They update it in consultation with tribes. One of the things I think that we saw, and looking back, President Obama did the same thing at the beginning of his administration. It was the first thing out the gate, is it does put some demands on tribes. There is the language of the executive memo requires that each agency report back to President Biden with their plan within 90 days after consulting with tribes. So we've seen some of those notices go out, requesting the consultation with tribes from the agencies, but that means tribal leaders will devote time, staff resources, and others all over 3 months. And then the agencies then will be required to file a report, submit a report to the White House yearly thereafter. But it is an important foundational step, certainly because of the intervening years where not much attention was paid to tribal consultation.
I also wanted to ask you about, we're all concerned about how tribes are faring during the pandemic and the economics of that. And Congress is moving through with new relief legislation. What does it look like for tribal governments?
Well, that was breaking news last night, Mark. There had been no language. We had seen, several iterations. I think all of us have had a little PTSD in terms of the false starts after the initial $8 billion that was distributed. I think it was a little over 10 billion in total. 8 billion direct tribal governmental relief, 2 billion to tribal programs throughout the agencies. And that was a tremendous help last spring. And we hit some bumps in the road in the implementation, obviously, that are ongoing. And the proposal from House Democrats that was in the HEROES Act was 20 billion. We have kept our eyes on that. Tribal advocates, tribal leaders have done a tremendous job of conveying the priorities, the ongoing need for relief in Indian country, given the disproportionate impacts in our communities. So last night, the language, each day, the budget reconciliation process is really a tedious one to explain, but basically all you need is 51 votes to pass as opposed to the 60. So that's what we have in the Senate. They are, Nancy Pelosi and her team and leadership is really kind of shepherding the bill. It will come over from the House first, but each committee was writing a segment of it, largely procedural because the leadership is watching this very closely. And what came out last night was from the Oversight and Reform Committee was a $20 billion relief fund, tribal governmental relief for tribes, 1 billion that will be split evenly amongst the tribes, and then 19 billion that will be split as determined by a formula at the Department of Treasury, much like the last time around, which again brings us back to why consultation is so important. According to the Speaker's office, they weren't allowed to include any requirements for consultation, but they are working closely with the administration to ensure that tribal consultation is completed before any distribution formula is finally put in place. So that $20 billion is key. I understand there's an additional $8 billion. Not all of the committees have released language yet, but there is $8 billion going to, I believe, $6 billion to the IHS. There will be additional funds for BIE and other tribal programs. So it is, look, the numbers, the initial numbers are terrific. I think this is an unprecedented infusion of additional funds for tribal programs, for tribal governments and Indian country. And it will take some work to get those to get those dollars out to the tribes. The House intends to send this bill, they will consider the bill over to the Senate by the end of the month. I will take the Senate also, oh wait, by next week. The Senate will then consider it, and they hope to get that over to the White House by March. So we have some terrific advocates at all levels, both at the committee level and leadership in both chambers. Tribal leaders have been, as I said, and the communities, NAFOA, all of the orgs have really been working overtime to ensure that the ongoing needs in Indian country are communicated to the folks writing the bill.
That really has the potential to kickstart the economy in ways that really, and like you said, unprecedented.
Yes, exactly. I is still getting my head around it even this morning and reading through the language last night. And we saw what the $8 billion did back in May and June when the funds were being distributed. And to get our heads around the $20 billion for tribal governmental relief, there is language in there that accounts for, allows for lost revenue for tribal economic enterprises, which there is increased flexibility in there. And the funds obviously to the IHS, there was reporting this week, additional reporting that the impacts in Indian country, that twice as many Native Americans are dying than in the non-Native community. So the numbers, the impacts are tremendous, and the need for things like clean water, other projects that will help us fight this pandemic, all of these funds will be helpful. It really is, I think, tribal leaders and all of us, as we continue to see language come out this week about the details of the funds, we'll have, again, a better sense of exactly where those dollars are going and how we can use them. But it is a huge, and like I said, unprecedented infusion of resources for tribes.
We only have a little more than a minute left, and I wanted to ask you about Representative Deb Haaland and her confirmation path. Got a little more complicated this week.
It did get a little more complicated, only in the sense, I think the noise from those who are in opposition to President Biden's climate change agenda, and thus are opposing Congresswoman Haaland's nomination. So she is going through, as I mentioned last week, the hearing process. Senator Daines put out a tweet airing some of his concerns. Those aren't really a surprise. I do think we will, it could be a party line vote, a 50-50 vote coming out of the committee, and a tie vote and with the power sharing agreement means we will advance. And all Deb needs is 51 votes in the Senate. So Kamala Harris has to come down the street, so be it. That's what happens when you have the majority. She continues her meetings with members of the subcommittee and even members of the full Senate, which she will continue to do. I understand that the hearing is targeted for the end of the month, not a hard date, but sometime during that last week of February. That could fall. There was concern, I think, even earlier this week that when McDonough went through as Veterans Affairs, he might be the last one. But I do see that they've calendared Merrick Garland's confirmation hearing for that same last week of February, which I think bodes well for Deb's date holding for that last week as well. But I encourage tribes to get letters in of support because the opposition is certainly weighing in.
Well, thank you so much, Holly, for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahant.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.